finish up our theoretical analysis of family, we're going to take a look at what interactionist theorists, or people who take that perspective in sociology, would be concerned about and would be interested in with regards to family. So interactionists focus on the micro level of family and other intimate relationships. The family, from their perspective, is just a set of interacting individuals. So the reality of marriage and family life, according to the interactionists, is not fixed, but is socially constructed by various family members with different roles, privileges, and responsibilities. So they're interested in how individuals interact with each other based on and around those family relationships, whether they be family relationships between cohabiting partners, longtime married couples, parents and children, step-parents and stepchildren, and so on. So we can think about family from the interactionist perspective by looking at it in terms of status and role, those concepts that we talked about earlier in the semester. A status, you may remember, is a position that people occupy within society. So think about what some of those statuses might be that are associated with family. Things like father, mother, son, daughter, sister, brother, spouse, and so on. And associated with each of those statuses, there are certain roles or behaviors that are expected of someone who occupies that status. And that's where some of the privileges and also responsibilities come into play when it comes to those roles, those expectations, and that sort of thing. And on a related note, symbolic interactionists would also be concerned about things like role conflict and role strain within the family. So again, those are concepts that we talked about earlier in the semester. Role conflict is when there's conflict among the roles that are connected to two or more statuses. And then role strain is that tension that results when the roles connected to a single status kind of conflict or pull at one another a little bit. So you might try to think about what would be some examples of role conflict and role strain that are associated with those different statuses within the family. Now, another approach that is sort of an extension of the symbolic interactionist approach is what's known as the social exchange approach. And the social exchange approach takes a market approach to family and particularly to mate selection. So it applies a market model and looks at how mate selection occurs based on ideas related to markets. So this theory was developed by two interactionists, George Homans and Peter Blau. And in their view, social interaction is guided by what each person stands to gain and lose from others, those others that they're in interaction with. And so this model is based on an economic model of costs, benefits, and the expectation of reciprocity. Social exchange theory looks at courtship, mate selection, marriage as forms of negotiation. They argue that dating allows each person to assess the advantages and disadvantages of taking another person as a spouse, always keeping in mind the value of what they have to offer in return. So in essence, exchange theorists suggest that people sort of shop around, and that's what dating is, that they're shopping around to make the best deal they possibly can in a partner. And so what we want to do in that selection process is we want to maximize the benefits and minimize the costs in order to get the best deal. So they argue that we all bring certain things, like to certain commodities, to the marriage market, and we hope to trade on those commodities. Traditionally, that was based on gender. So there were certain things that women were thought to be able to bring to that marriage market and to that relationship when that relationship forms. And then there were certain things that men were thought to be able to bring to that market. And again, traditionally, men were thought to be able to bring their earning power, their earnings potential, and their ability to be breadwinners and that kind of thing. Whereas women brought other things to the relationship. So that's how that exchange approach works, that social exchange approach, or the market model of mate selection works. The idea that we have certain things that we can trade on in terms of that marriage market. Now, one last perspective that we're going to talk just briefly about that's associated with other perspectives is the feminist perspective. And feminist sociologists have taken a strong interest in the family as a social institution. These theorists, like conflict theorists, have suggested that family has traditionally legitimized and perpetuated male dominance. So in essence, the family is viewed as an economic unit that contributes to societal injustice. And they would argue that women and children are subordinate members of the family. And as a result, they may be subjected to a number of injustices, whether those are economic or otherwise. So some of these feminist theorists, when they study family, they look at things like how women's work outside the home impacts childcare and housework duties. And there's been a lot of research in that area. Arlie Hochschild has done some of that work, and she's the person who's credited with beginning to use that term, women's second shift, that we talked about a little bit earlier, to refer to the work that women do when they come home from their jobs outside the homes. These theorists also stress the need to rethink the notion that families in which no adult male is present are automatically a cause for concern or even dysfunctional. And they've also done research on topics such as single women, single-parent households, and lesbian couples. Now, some feminist theorists take more of an interactionist approach rather than a conflict approach, and their work stresses the need to investigate what they see as neglected topics in family studies, such as dual income households in which wives earn more than their husbands. And so they're concerned about how that comes into play, how that influences that social reality that's constructed through interaction between those individuals. So those interactionists also focus on the micro level of family and other intimate relationships. And they're interested in how individuals, whether they're cohabiting or married, interact with one another, and in the role of step-parent in families where a single parent has remarried. So those are just some of the areas that feminist theorists are concerned about when it comes to family.